So you're going to Paris. And if I were going with you, these are the things I'd invite you to do. Second edition by Clara E. Laughlin. Copyright Houghton Mifflin Company. The Riverside Press, Cambridge, 1925. Clara Elizabeth Laughlin was born August 3, 1873, and died March 3, 1941. In 1892, an 18-year-old Clara asked if an editor of a Chicago-based weekly publication to hire her. She began reviewing books for $18 a month, and by her 20s, she was publishing books. In 1902, Clara's first book, Stories of Authors' Loves, was published. She'd go on to publish an additional 21 non-travel related books over her lifetime. In 1923, Clara was named a Chevalier of the Legion of Honor by the French government for her writing services during World War I. In 1926, with 3 So You're Going books published and a 4th in the works, Miss Laughlin was hosting travel seminar luncheons and was running motor tours in Normandy and Brittany. In 1928, it was reported that Clara managed travel offices in the U.S. and Europe, and she had directed more travelers than any other individual. In 1935, at a luncheon, Clara explained how she'd befriended famed poet James Whitcomb Riley as a teenager. She'd sent him $25 and solicited as much of his very best poetry as he could supply at that price. In 1936, in the graphologist column of the Daily News, Clara's handwriting was determined to be small and uniform, not indicative of her analytical and critical mind. Clara was a native New Yorker who grew up in Chicago, Illinois, grew close ties to Indianapolis, Indiana, and seemingly had a particular love of France. How writing So You're Going to Paris helped Clara succeed. In 1928, the Evansville Press reported that Clara was the first woman to create and head an organization for the selling of foreign travel. As a world traveler, many people asked her for travel advice, and Clara said, "Finally, in my leisure time, I began to give lectures on European travel." She said that a friend and book section head at a top Chicago department store encouraged her to write a book on Paris despite competition in the market and several publishers advising her that travel books did not sell. But Clara finally found a publisher, and So You're Going to Paris became a hit. Without prompting, the Chicago manager for the Cunard Line signed an application for Clara to be a Cunard agent. She decided to go for it, and after aligning with additional steamship lines, opened her office in the Fine Arts Building. She spent her afternoons here, but reserved other times of the day for her writing, and like her travel guides, Laughlin's travel service also became a hit, and her business grew. Clara said, "I believe there must be many businesses with better prospects for making money than selling travel. But I can hardly believe that there is another I could love half so much." So You're Going to Paris, Chapter 12, Your 12th Paris Day. If you were at Versailles yesterday, you are probably not feeling extraordinarily ambitious this morning. So I have planned for you a day you may start late, finish early, and see some very interesting and important parts of Paris with a very moderate amount of walking. Suppose you say that you will be at Notre Dame at 11 o'clock or thereabouts. If you think you will want to climb the towers, which is a bit fatiguing but well worth the doing, not for the view alone, but for the impression one gets at close range of the infinite and beautiful detail of Gothic architecture, flowering stone, it would be well to start at least half an hour earlier. I have gone very often to Notre Dame with friends who were seeing it for the first time, and I cannot remember that any of them seemed avid for many facts about it or disposed to study it architecturally or archaeologically. Most people who read, who have any background, have thought so much about seeing Notre Dame, looked forward to it so long and so eagerly, that when they at last find themselves there, they are more or less overcome by emotion. And as this seems to me so eminently right, I never want to disturb their ecstasy by a single nudge or suggestion. I like going with people who feel thus about it, and I like going with others who have been there many times and have long since begun to have special enthusiasms. One friend of mine has been fascinated by gargoyles and has given a world of study to those fantastic waterspouts. She tells me delightful things about the famous ones of Notre Dame. Another friend is a close student of ancient stained glass and tells me much that enhances my appreciation of those and other glorious windows. Many friends I have who are architects specializing in Gothic, or teachers and lecturers in Gothic art, going to Notre Dame with them is a liberal education. Other friends are etchers, and I know few things more interesting than going round and round Notre Dame with one of them looking for a vantage point from which to sketch, unless it be going round and round inside and out with one of those other friends who can recreate before my inner eye Notre Dame as it was in days long gone. I have been there too with friends who were students of sacred music and who have told me what would make a fascinating book about music at Notre Dame. I have tried to choose from all that I have read about Notre Dame and all that I have been told about it and that all that I have seen there, what might best serve you on your first and perhaps only visit to it. And after weeks of consideration, I have come to the conclusion that the thing to do here in a book is the thing I should do were I there with you in the flesh. And if I were actually escorting you thither for your first visit, I'd never halt you outside to remind you when this cathedral was begun and when finished, to urge you to study the sculptures of the facade or the details of the portals. If you had wanted to stop guidebook in hand and inform yourself about those things, I'd be respectful of your desire. If you were not yet ready for them, we'd go in. And I'd never tell you how long the nave is, nor how high, I don't know, nor prod you to notice the double aisles. I'd follow you silently, as you chose your way and reveled in your own reflections. Some, on their first visit, are overcome by the awesome beauty of what their eyes behold. Others are thrilled by the thought of waking with their footsteps the echoes of others who have trod these stones in ages long gone by. It may be that you will witness a church ceremony of some sort. An unforgettable one I once saw at Notre Dame was the funeral of an old cocher or cab driver. An exceedingly humble funeral it was, following the pompous beadle down one of the shadowy right aisles, his staff of office thumping measuredly on the stone pavement to announce the coming of His Majesty Death, the King of Kings. St. Louis was buried from here, and with more pomp than my cocher, but with no more reverence. I was very deeply touched by the way that poor man's obsequies seemed perfectly at home in the glorious old cathedral. There was not the slightest incongruity about their being there. And I tried to think whether this triumph of democracy was due to Christianity or to the French spirit. I dare say both were responsible, but when I tried to think of a cab driver's funeral at Westminster Abbey or Canterbury Cathedral or St. Thomas's on Fifth Avenue, I had to grant the French attitude toward death the greater credit. You may want to visit the treasury, where the reliquaries of the crown of thorns and the nail of the true cross are kept, and Thomas A. Becket's cross and other relics, some sacred and some interesting for other reasons, like Napoleon's coronation mantle. Of course, you'll pay your respects to Notre Dame de Paris, the famous statue of the Virgin, which has been venerated for more than 5 centuries. You will walk around the ambulatory and see the choir stalls and perhaps ascend the North Tower. If you haven't had a good view of the apse, walk around to the east and gaze up at those marvelous flying buttresses. To the north of the cathedral is a district with many interesting associations. I would like to take you prowling there, but that is perhaps for the leisurely sojourner in Paris rather than for the tourist. So take a few moments' rest after your descent from the tower. Sit in the charming gardens at the south of the cathedral. Now cross the Ponto Double, close to Notre Dame, and reach the Quai de Montebello. The street which runs from the bridge head is Rue Lagrange, and a few feet from the bridge on your right is a street called Rue de Foire, or Street of the Straw or Fodder. Follow this street past some half-dozen houses only to the Rue Galande, also a very ancient street with many quaint old houses, and turn again to your right into Rue Saint-Julien-le-Pauvre, in which you will find the little old church of the same name. There was a chapel and a religious lodging house here away back in the 6th century, when St. Gregory of Tours was sheltered there. The present church is a little older than the oldest part of Notre Dame. It was the chapel of the Hôtel Dieu, the hospital, for many years, and is now used by Greek Catholics, subject to the Pope of Rome. St. Julian the Poor was a humble man who served his poor fellows by ferrying them across the river. One day a leper whom he had thus served revealed himself as Christ. This story is told in sculptural relief over a door at 42 Rue Galande. In the yard north of St. Julian's Church is a considerable fragment of Philippe Auguste's wall. The view of Notre Dame from this little garden is splendidly impressive.